Okay, we've got a 2015 or 2014? 2014 GMC Sierra, nope, Chevy Silverado. 1500, this is the 5.3 engine. We're going to, again, direct injection. Critical that these oil vapors and other PCB compounds are trapped before they get ingested and cause the intake valve coking. Now this is going to be a single valve install, and the 5.3 and the 6.2 are identical in installation with the exception of one issue, or one feature. Instead of the intake manifold vacuum bar being right on the front here, it's going to be about halfway back on the driver's side of the intake manifold. That's the only thing different. Everything else is going to hook up the same. So the first thing we're going to do is, using the flat blade screwdriver, we're going to push in, or we don't even need a flat blade screwdriver. These quick release, you're going to push up on the gray portion and this will pop right off. And these both are the clean side lines. Now that we've got that, we're going to unscrew the clamps that hold the intake box into place. And I'm going to get a step up on here. Just because these four-wheel drives are so far up in the air. And these are simple screw clamps. There's one on the throttle body to the air box, and there's one just before we get to the air filter assembly. Once that's loosened, this will come up. We're going to pull both of these out, and the first thing we're going to look for is the presence of oil that may be getting in from the clean side. If there isn't oil coming in from the clean side, this isn't that critical. So I'm going to take a rag and we're going to go up in here and we're just going to wipe it around and see if we have any oil. And very little on this, so clean side is recommended, but you can get away without it and still accomplish most. Throttle body itself, we're going to feel in the front side of it has no oil on it, and that's another sign that this engine is good. But on the back side, we've got all this black buildup that you can see on my finger, and that's what we're going to be eliminating in the future. Now we're going to wipe this down so we've got a clean start here. I'm going to take it one step further and we're going to remove the throttle body, and we're going to clean it. Simply unplug, and you've got four 10mm head bolts. And the back side of the throttle body, drop your bolts. We can see in here where we've got that buildup. We're gonna wipe that off. A little brake clean can help you, or carb cleaner on a rag. Since this only has a few thousand miles on it, it's not that bad. we're still going to take care of this. Now what we're going to look for, now the ingestion on the 5.3 is going to be entering the intake manifold midway back again on the driver's side here. 6.2 is going to come right out here in the front. So most of this oil that is accumulating in here with the 5.3 is going to be further back in than with the 6.2. The 6.2 you would have a good amount of it right to the front. As you can see, we've still got quite a bit that's getting dispersed through there. And that's the goal here, is to stop this. So now we clean the throttle body. We can put it back together, but I'm just going to go further with the catch can installation now. What we have got to do here is the same push to release, and this is the PCV exit right here. So you can see that's already full of oil. There shouldn't be any. And we can wipe that off and see just on that little barb. This is going to go to the center of the catch can. And we're going to remove this from the other side here. And pull this out, and again you can see in there it is just saturated with oil that's been ingested into the intake manifold directly. We're going to take a 15 millimeter and we're going to loosen and remove the nut that holds the master cylinder to the vacuum booster, and that is going to be where we're going to mount the can here. And you'll have to post a link of this up on the Silverado Sierra forum once we get it.
Yeah, I'll do that
on YouTube here. I don't get on that forum very often, but
I bounce between both of them, figuring out what the next tunes to get. The next will be a tune, then we'll look at everything else.
Yeah, tune is a big plus because you've got variable valve timing and displacement on that demand.
Yeah, I think I've decided with Black Bear, I'll just wait for the timing.
Yeah. Tuning we do will be a full custom tune using HP tuners.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
So then there'll be no need to buy the auto cap.
No. Now, we're going to mount this directly onto that stud. But first, we're going to see how we want this to mount. And we see that the top two holes here are going to be the best. We're going to take our 1/4 bolt and lock washer, and bolt this into place, bracket onto the can. This is going to be 7/16. Everything else will be metric.
I lost your lock washer.
Lost my lock washer there. And you're just going to snug these up. Can is going to then right here, put the nut back on, the stud's plenty long enough. Sure it's straight up and down and nice and snug. Now the can is mounted. First thing we're going to do is take our included 3/8 inch -6 line. We're going to go from the intake manifold barb, which on this 5.3 is halfway back on the manifold, and that is going to go to the outer fitting. We're going to have our one-way check valve right here, arrow on it, flowing away. Blow to make sure that it flows away from the can, does not flow in, and this is going to go on to the can outlet. Your fitting may be black anodized, this one is a nickel, a little fancier one, and we're going to orient this so the hose is not kinked. Measure it to length.
You want to come around and get a shot of the barb?
Sure. And I'll need
Joe.
so you got your hose cutter.
Did you mount that to the booster?
Yeah. Earlier years it'll mount to the alternator or power steering bracket.
See this hose here is the one that's going to the barb.
Yeah. Let me get a little flashlight on there so you can see that barb. It's right there halfway coming out, and that's what we removed this OEM line from right here, which went from there down to the valley cover barb. And this we're not going to use, but take that, set it aside, and use it later. So again, we're going to measure, cut to length, push it over the check valve barb, and we have now completed the outlet from the can. Outer is the outlet. If this was a dual valve can, we would have a second outlet check valve fitting, and that would go into the coupler upstream of the throttle body. This is a single valve application. Now, we're going to channel our PCV vapors from the valley cover barb into the center of the inlet of the can. This being the simplest, take your tube, push it onto that barb. No need for clamps. This isn't under pressure. This is under vacuum. But push it all the way on to seat it. Again, making sure we don't kink the hose. We're going to measure, cut our line. And this is going to go on to the center fitting, which is the inlet of the can. Make sure that our drain valve is closed, sideways is closed, straight up and down is open for emptying. Simply put a cup or a empty water bottle underneath when you're going to empty. Every oil change is fine as long as you don't have excess consumption. You're going to want to try it after 1,000 or so miles just to see what you're accumulating. And again, valve closed, valve open. Alright, now since we're not doing the clean side separator,
A line to go on it?
no, we won't need to. We're just going to put a little barb on here to make it a little cleaner. Alright, now if we were doing the clean side separator, we would remove both of these and we would put a piece of 1/2 inch line, and these two would be hooked together. That would slide right over it. We would simply press to release, we would push this on, and we would hook the two valve covers together. We would replace the oil fill cap with the clean side separator, and then that would go from the clean side separator to the barb on the air box here that you saw us disconnect this from before. The barb on the air box on the passenger side, then you'll cap with the included vacuum cap. Since we're not doing the clean side on this one, we're just going to put this back together, and this is a real good sign that we're not seeing oil coming in through there. Just a small amount. So I'd say 98% of the oil ingestion is all coming through the dirty side on this. That's going to be dependent on how well the ring's seated in the initial break-in period. It's important that the rings seat properly, and that involves a little bit of aggressive driving in the first 100-200 miles. The GM specs for break-in on the replacement engines that we as techs are given is way different than what comes in the owner's manual. We recommend that you, in probably second gear, after you've put 30 miles or so on, to heat cycle the engine a few times. You're going to want to do a aggressive acceleration in second gear up to say 4,000 RPM, and then let it decelerate. So you're loading the rings both through acceleration and deceleration. That's going to give the most contact and even force onto the crosshatch in the hone, and it's going to seat those rings and braid them into the shape of the cylinder wall properly in that brief window. By the time you've got 400 to 500 miles on your vehicle, a hard glaze is set up on the cylinder wall, and there's no more ring seating taking place. That brief break-in window has passed. That's one of the main causes of excess oil consumption in these engines, is driving it easy and following the owner's manual instruction, which will give you about a 50-50% chance that you're either going to be an oil consumer or not. If you break it in the way they should be properly, as I've described, you're going to have those rings seated properly in that brief window, and odds are you're not going to have an excess oil consumption issue. So here we've got everything again has been installed, our hoses, center of the can from the crankcase, outside of the can to the intake manifold. We're going to reinstall the throttle body. We've cleaned the buildup off of it, and again I believe 8,000 miles, Joe? 8,000 miles. Had a fair amount of buildup on that throttle body. As that buildup increases and builds, it begins to cause a stumble and a brief hesitation as you accelerate off of idle. That's because of an uneven air flow transition when you're transitioning from a closed throttle blade to an open one. We're going to put the bolts back in. We're just going to gently snug these up in a crisscross pattern so it goes in easy, and then do not over tighten. You're just going to do a nice hand tight, not torqued and reefed down. You're going to plug in the throttle body again, make sure it's firmly plugged in, press the lock pin back in place. We're going to take the air box, we're going to reinstall it and push it firmly on to the throttle body. And then onto the air filter assembly. Make sure you seat it fully. Let's see, did I drop my screwdriver? I believe I did.
Underneath.
Underneath it. There we go. Snug these clamps up tight. Now this install took a little longer since I removed the throttle body and narrated it, but it shouldn't take much over 15 minutes for the average person handy with hand tools. Okay, this is all in place. We're simply, since we did not do the clean side separator, snap these into place. Now if we would have, this barb right here would have been going to the barb on the clean side separator. And then make sure we always send the bigger barb for these, for any of the Silverado, Sierra,
Half-inch?
GM truck, the half-inch one, yes. And we also need a couple foot long piece of half-inch hose. This one's a little short, so about 6 inches longer than this, so along with our standard other hose. There's going to be some leftover barbs and fittings. Those are just sent as a standard kit. You've got extra hose. If routing is done differently, if the can is mounted in a different location, like up on the firewall, then you've got enough hose to mount the can there. Works real effectively where it is. Real easy to get at and drain. But some people, if there isn't a second battery, will mount that over on the firewall here. And we've completed it, so what we're going to do now is start the truck up. Make sure we've got no vacuum leaks, everything's working properly, and that's the installation.
RXPerformanceProducts.com.